The clinic smelled sterile, white walls, fluorescent lights, the kind of place where every surface gleamed with an almost unnatural cleanliness, as if trying to erase any trace of human presence. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic, a constant reminder of the clinical nature of the place. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the outside world, a bubble of order and precision. It felt like a confessional for decisions you couldn't take back, a place where the weight of your choices pressed down on you, making the air feel heavier. The walls seemed to close in, amplifying the silence, making every thought echo louder in your mind. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, forcing you to confront the gravity of your decisions. Like that moment in a bar years ago when I swore off tequila. The memory was vivid, the taste of regret as sharp as the burn of the alcohol. I remembered the promises I made to myself, the resolve that seemed so strong in the dim light of the bar. But this was different. This wasn't about a night of poor choices and a morning of regret, only this time it wasn't about hangovers. It was about something far more permanent, the kind of decision that would shape the rest of my life. The kind of decision that you couldn't just sleep off or forget about in a few days. It was about the future, about the kind of person I wanted to be. It was about life choices, permanent ones, choices that would define who I was and who I would become, choices that would affect not just me, but the people around me. It was a heavy burden to bear, and the weight of it was almost suffocating. "You sure about this, son?" His voice was gentle, but there was an edge of concern. He was trying to be supportive, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He wanted to make sure I had thought this through, that I understood the implications of what I was about to do. "Yes, sir," I mumbled, clutching the thin hospital gown. My voice was barely above a whisper, the words catching in my throat. I tried to sound confident, but the truth was, I was terrified. The gown felt flimsy, a poor shield against the enormity of what I was about to do. He nodded, his eyes filled with a wisdom I couldn't decipher. There was something in his gaze, a depth of understanding that I couldn't quite grasp. It was as if he could see the future, see the paths that lay ahead of me, and he was trying to guide me without pushing too hard. Did he see regret in my future, or maybe relief? I couldn't tell. His expression was inscrutable, a mix of emotions that I couldn't read. I wondered if he had been in my position once, if he had faced a similar choice and come out the other side. Truth was, I didn't know myself. I just knew I didn't want kids. Not now, maybe not ever. The thought of bringing a child into the world, of being responsible for another life, was overwhelming. I wasn't ready for that kind of commitment, that kind of responsibility. And maybe deep down, I knew I never would be. 2 years later, the tequila was back in my life. It had been a long journey to get here, filled with ups and downs, moments of clarity, and times of confusion. But here I was, pouring myself a drink, reflecting on how much had changed. The regret? Not so much. Life was good, simple. I had found a rhythm, a balance that I hadn't known before. The days were predictable, the nights peaceful. I had my routines, my little joys, and I was content. Then came Jessica, a whirlwind of blonde hair and bright laughter. She was like a breath of fresh air, a burst of energy that I didn't know I needed. Her presence was magnetic, drawing me in with every smile, every laugh. She blew into my life, and suddenly the tequila wasn't the only thing making my head spin. We spent countless nights talking, laughing, dreaming about the future. She had a way of making everything seem possible, of turning the mundane into something magical.
"We're gonna have a baby."
Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, with promise, with uncertainty. Her voice, usually so full of joy, was small, uncertain. It was as if she was afraid of what this new chapter might bring, of how it might change us, change everything. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. A baby? Our baby? The words echoed in my mind, each repetition bringing a new wave of shock, of disbelief. My mind raced back to the sterile clinic, to Doc Miller's knowing eyes. He had warned me about this, about the possibility, but it had seemed so distant, so unreal. This couldn't be happening. Could it? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more pressing than the last. How would we manage? What would this mean for us, for our future? The uncertainty was overwhelming, but beneath it all, there was a flicker of something else: hope. The next few days were a blur. The world around me moved at a dizzying pace, yet I felt like I was stuck in slow motion, unable to keep up with the whirlwind of emotions and events unfolding before me. Jessica, glowing with happiness, already picking out baby names. She was so full of life, her excitement palpable as she imagined our future. She would spend hours browsing through baby clothes, her eyes lighting up with every tiny outfit she held. Me, lost in a fog of confusion and a growing sense of unease. I couldn't share in her joy, no matter how hard I tried. My mind was a storm of doubts and fears, each one louder than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It gnawed at me, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind. I found myself pacing the room at night, staring off into the distance, searching for answers that eluded me. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I had always imagined this moment filled with joy and anticipation, but instead, I felt a deep sense of disappointment and sadness. I was lost, unable to find my way back to the happiness I once knew. One night while Jessica slept, I found myself staring at a photo of us from a few months back. We looked so happy, so in love. But now, that happiness seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the doubts that plagued my mind. We were at a bar, her ex-boyfriend lurking in the background. I remembered that night vividly. Jessica had laughed and chatted with him, and I had tried to ignore the pang of jealousy that twisted in my gut. Jealousy, a familiar beast, stirred within me. He'd always wanted kids. I couldn't help but wonder if he still harbored feelings for her, if he had ever truly let go of the dreams they once shared. Had he maybe gotten his wish? The thought gnawed at me, a dark seed of suspicion taking root in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, that perhaps I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The whispers of doubt grew louder, and I knew I had to find the truth, no matter the cost. The doubt, once a whisper, grew into a roar. I found myself watching Jessica, searching for clues, any sign that would either confirm or deny my suspicions. But her joy seemed genuine, her excitement contagious.
You okay, babe?
She asked one morning, her hand resting gently on my arm.
You seem distant.
Yeah, I mumbled, forcing a smile. Just tired. But the lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I needed to know the truth, for both of us. A confrontation would have to happen, but I couldn't figure out how to go about it. The words caught in my throat, a tangled mess of fear and accusation. How do you ask the woman you love if she's carrying another man's child? The question hung heavy in the air, unspoken but ever present. Jessica, I began, my voice raspy as I asked that fatal question. Are you sure? But I couldn't finish the sentence. The words, laced with doubt and suspicion, felt like poison. I couldn't bear to see the hurt in her eyes, not yet. The walls began to close in around me. Silence became my only refuge. A heavy, suffocating silence that pushed us further apart with each passing day. Jessica, sensing my distance, retreated into herself, her initial joy now clouded with worry.
What's wrong, honey?
She'd ask, her voice laced with a desperation that mirrored my own.
Talk to me.
But the words were trapped, locked away behind a wall of fear and uncertainty. The truth I knew was the only key. But what if the truth shattered everything? There was a heavy weight to silence. Days turned into weeks, the unspoken question festering between us like an open wound. The weight of it became unbearable, a constant ache in my chest that no amount of tequila could numb. Our baby girl arrived. She was a bundle of pink wrapped in tight blankets. One night, while Jessica slept, I found myself staring down into her bassinet, her mouth suckling in her sleep, her little pink lips opening and closing. I had to know. I got on the internet, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the darkness. Paternity test. The words jumped out at me, a lifeline in a sea of doubt. Could this be the answer? Could it set us free? The next morning, I made an appointment at a clinic across town. I told Jessica I wanted to take the baby for a drive since she was fussy and Jessica was tired, the lie slipping out a little too easily. Guilt gnawed at me, but so did the need for truth. The clinic was nondescript, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. I filled out the paperwork, my hand trembling as I wrote down my information. It felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life, someone else's drama. But this was my life, our life. The procedure itself was quick, almost anticlimactic. A swab of the cheek, a vial of blood. The baby tolerated it well. That's all it took to potentially unravel everything. As I walked out of the clinic, the weight of the secret felt heavier than ever. The drive home was a blur. I could barely look at Jessica, her innocent joy a constant reminder of the storm that might be coming. The results, I knew, would be life-altering. but at least we'd finally know the truth. The next few days were agonizing. Every ring of the phone sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Every time Jessica smiled, my heart ached with a mixture of love and dread. Then the call came.
Mr. Cooper,
The voice on the other end asked. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the impact.
your results are in. The results were conclusive. You are not the father.
The words hit me like a physical blow. Relief, sharp and unexpected, washed over me. I wasn't crazy. My suspicions had been right all along, but as quickly as the relief came, it was replaced by a wave of sadness. What did this mean for us? For Jessica? For the life we were building together? I knew the answers wouldn't come easily, but at least we had a starting point. The truth, painful as it might be, had set us free.
What's wrong?
She wanted to know. I stared at her, the phone still clutched in my hand. Before we met, I had a vasectomy, I blurted out. She took a step back, her reaction as visceral as if I'd slapped her. Her brow furrowed. She shook her head. Yes, I reiterated. I had to explain, but didn't know how. Before we met, I had a vasectomy, I said. I am a carrier for a rare genetic condition that I didn't want to pass on. I never mentioned it because you knew I didn't want kids. Then this happened. I looked over at our daughter, Jessica's daughter, asleep in her bassinet. I took a test, I told her. She's not mine. Jessica blanched.
It was just once.
She told me. But once was enough. I packed my things and left. I sometimes see pictures of her and her baby on social media. She looks happy, and the baby is healthy. That's enough for me. I don't regret my decisions at all, though the idea of the perfect life that didn't happen sometimes weighs heavily, but the sting of her betrayal and lies pushes those desires back. In the end, I was right to get the vasectomy. I was right to get the paternity test. I was right to leave. On the day that I met my new wife, I looked Jessica up on social media one more time. Then I unfriended her, and I walked toward my future,